Hello guys, how are you all doing? So today we are gonna see, what if Luffy ate 2 devil fruit, part 6, so let's begin the video. Nami. Luffy spoke with a serious tone, making the navigator's anger vanish instantly. We live in the golden age of piracy, being a pirate alone will get you in trouble with the marines, bounty or no bounty. This time Luffy's voice went back to his lighter tone. Besides, it was bound to happen sooner or later, and I'd prefer it to happen sooner than later, so I'm not complaining. Nami wanted to say more, but was interrupted by Sanji's call for lunch. Later, the crew sat and enjoyed their meal until Usopp popped a question. So, where's our next stop? He asked. Jin voiced his grim reply. At the rate we're going, Loguetown, the place where journeys begin and end. It's the final stop before entering the Grand Line. It's also the place where the Pirate King, Gold Roger, was born and where he died and began the Golden Age. At this, Luffy's grin threatened to split his face in two. Alright. I wanna go there. Luffy yelled. He felt as happy as a kid in a candy store. If anything, I hope I can find some new swords. I can't fight to my full potential this way, said Zoro. Usopp scratched his chin in thought before answering. I've needed some new goggles. Maybe something that can help me in battle. Nami looked pleased. And I definitely need some new clothes. Maybe one that shows off my curves in the right places. She winked to Sanji, who caught her look before turning back to his meal, hoping she wouldn't see the faint blush on his otherwise blank face. Hawkins said nothing, he was too busy looking at his tarot cards. After a short period of silence from the mystic, he spoke. Luffy, expect another recruitment. Someone you've recently met. Luffy looked perplexed at Hawkins' statement. He knew it was a prediction, but with Hawkins, every prediction was a cryptic message. So he shrugged and pumped his fists into the air. Then it settled, set a course for Loguetown. He yelled. As soon as Ryoku was given the directions, he pulled the reins with all his might, the Going Merry hanging in tow. They sped off into the horizon like an extra-large motorboat to the birth-death place of Gold Roger. An unknown island in the New World. CC Captain, it's Mihik, he's here. Cried a newbie pirate, as he ran into a clearing where his captain would be. Sure enough, there he was, sitting under a large umbrella. Around him were his generals. One was a rotund man chomping on a large piece of rotisserie. The other was a lackadaisical scruffy man laid back against a stump without a care. The last was the captain's first mate, smoking a cigar, and had an X-shaped scar across the left side of his face. Before them stood the world's greatest swordsman. What is it you want, Hawkeye? I'm not in the mood to fight you. The captain replied. Don't worry, you've bored me long enough. Actually, I came here to tell you that I met some interesting pirates. One of which happened to be a young rookie wearing a similar straw hat you once wore. He's very strong for a rookie. Mihik pulled out a wanted poster that he had been given by the world government. It was of Monkey D. Luffy. The sun took the time to illuminate the jungle, revealing a red-haired pirate with a tri-scar over his left eye. He flashed a big grin at Hawkeye's description. Well, I'll be damned. It's Luffy. Shanks exclaimed happily. All of the red-haired pirates lit up with joy at seeing Luffy's first wanted poster. So you finally started out, Luffy, Shanks said aloud. Fushia village. Back in Luffy's hometown, the local villagers smiled and laughed at how the boy could make a wanted poster look a lot less threatening. Makino smiled when she saw Luffy wearing Shanks' hat. She was sure that Luffy would go far in the world to accomplish his dream. Mayor Whoop Slap scolded the people for supporting the pirate, but Makino knew that he was happy for Luffy, even if he didn't show it. He was a stubborn old man, the mayor. I wonder how Luffy is doing, she thought. The Straw Hat crew had reached their island destination. It was filled with a lot of hustle and bustle, and people were coming in and out of shops. Whoa. This place is huge, exclaimed Luffy. Usopp gaped in awe. So this is the birthplace of Gold Roger, and the place of his execution, inputted Zoro. Luffy puffed out his chest in a goofy attempt to look tough. Yosh. I'm going to go see the execution scaffold. Hawkins decided to stay and guard the ship while examining his tarot cards. Usopp wanted to get some new goggles, as he remembered that they broke during his fight with Kuro. Jin and Zoro decided to get new weapons of their caliber, so they went in search of a local weapon shop. Sanji probably needed more kitchen utensils and food. Just as he was about to head off, he was promptly yanked by his arm. He snapped his head in the direction of a red-hat navigator tugging at his arm. And Nami-san. He stuttered surprisingly when he noticed a playful, mischievous grin on her adorable face. I'm in the Sanji-kun, but you're going to help me shop for clothes. Before the cook could say anything, she pulled him away and went to the nearest clothing store, his cigarette nearly falling out of his mouth. Zoro and Jin walked for a couple of minutes trying to find the weapon shop. Well, trying and failing since Zoro was the one leading the way. I'm telling you that we should just stop and ask for directions, Jin argued. And I'm telling you we don't need directions, Zoro countered. If there's a weapon shop around here, we're bound to find it, so shut up, Jin scoffed. With your sense of direction, I'd rather take my chances with a blind man, he remarked. Zoro rounded on him, his eyes flashed dangerously. What did you say? He growled, preparing to unsheath Wado from the scabbard. Jin prepared a fighting stance. Sparks of rivalry were shooting from their respective eyes, and clashed with each other. "You wanna fight?" challenged Jin. Just as the swordsman and the helmsman were about to duke it out, they heard a commotion going on in the middle of a crowd nearby at their location, disrupting their argument. They turned their attention to two pirates hassling a young woman with glasses, wielding a simple katana. "The damn Marines put our boss in jail, and now you're gonna pay," said one ugly, lanky pirate. "So we figured that if we kidnap you, we'd hold you ransom in exchange for our boss's freedom," threatened another fat ugly pirate with pigtails. "Well, I'll be happy to take you on," the woman replied with no fear in her soft voice. The crowd of civilians surrounding them stood silent and scared. As Zoro and Jin were about to step in, they were surprised when they saw her take them both down in one swift motion of fluidity from her sword. In one strike alone, the two pirates were down and out. Jin was impressed while Zoro was heart-struck at the graceful woman's movement and how she handled her blade. Of course, that moment passed when she tripped on her own 2 feet and fell face. The crowd laughed a bit at her klutziness, and her calm facade was replaced with one of a clumsy high school girl. "Oh dear, my glasses, where are my glasses?" The woman searched fervently all over the ground for her phone spectacles. Zoro found them and picked them up, then knelt down to the woman in front of him. Upon closer inspection, he noticed the woman had indigo hair. "Here are your glasses." He handed the young woman her glasses. When the woman lifted her head to meet the person kind enough to retrieve them, Zoro froze. The woman had the face of his long-dead female friend and rival, Kuina. "Ah, arigato. Sorry, without my glasses I'm not as visually perceptive as the next person," she said with a nervous smile. Zoro was still frozen on the spot. The Kuina look-alike stopped smiling and looked at the green-haired swordsman perplexingly. "Ah, hello." She waved her hand in front of his face a couple times. Jin groaned at this, as he unclenched his comrade's fist to prevent from crushing the glasses. To save face, and what's left of the swordsman's dignity, Jin lugged him over his shoulder while Zoro was playing dead weight. He was muttering something about beautiful ghosts, but it was pretty inaudible. "Sorry about my comrade, he's currently suffering from an advanced case of retard syndrome." The scruffy helmsman dragged Zoro along, leaving behind the confused woman. "Smooth sword boy, real smooth," Jin said sarcastically. Usopp was not happy right now. "Why?" "Well, rewinding back a bit to the point where the crew split up in different directions of the town, the first thing he needed to get was new goggles, better than the ones he used to have. When he reached a small goggle shop, he found a pair of sniping goggles that would be perfect for him to see and aim at longer distances, which would be incredibly useful for him to use in upcoming battles in the Grand Line. Or at least he would have if it weren't for a rude, snot-nosed 9-year-old girl who swiped a purchase from him while he was searching for his wallet. After a brief childish argument, the girl stuck her tongue out at him and ran off. Usopp chased after her and eventually caught up with her. After he demanded the goggles, demanding they were rightfully his since he was the one about to purchase them. However, when he was done scolding, the girl was brought to tears by his rant and started crying. Taken aback, Usopp tried to calm her down, but to no avail. It was then he felt a tap on his shoulder. "Not now, can't you see I'm trying to cheer up this bratty little girl?" he yelled, not looking at the person behind him. "Do you mean my daughter?" replied the person behind him in a gruff voice. Usopp froze before slowly turning around, standing face to face with a man in a desperate cowboy getup with large sideburns and a mustache goatee combo. He did not look pleased that the sniper was harassing his precious little angel. "Oh crap," Usopp cursed inwardly at his misfortune. Sanji sat firmly in place in front of a privacy booth after Nami went behind the curtain, tossing a seductive wink his way. To be fair, he felt a bit hot under the collar. He had not expected a woman to just drag him to a clothing shop for women. And he did certainly not expect that woman to be his crewmate. Within a few moments, Nami came back out of the dressing room in her full herdless glory, scantily clad, and wearing a red, skimpy 2-piece bikini, which revealed a lot of cleavage for her D-cup-sized breasts. The bottom half seemed to be tied together, as to give any potential suitor some perverted incentive. Nami posed like a high-fashion model by swinging and swaying her hips, as to attract his undivided attention. She succeeded, as the blonde chef sat in stunned silence, and felt the heat rise up in his collar, and felt his pants suddenly tighten. He caught full view of her creamy, shiny, and lightly tanned skin, with the exception of her chest and nether regions. Sanji swallowed thickly, as Nami posed in an adorable fashion by placing her left index finger on her bottom lip, and pouted cutely with her brown eyes shining. "Sanji-kun, do I look nice?" she innocently asked. The only response she got was a numb nod. Then her playful cat-like nature re-emerged, as she strutted towards his frozen form, and pecked him on the cheek. Placing her mouth near his ear, she whispered, "Good, because I have several outfits I want to try on, and I want your honest opinion about them. Every single one." Though Sanji struggled to keep a calm facade on the outside, inside it took nearly all his willpower not to succumb to his lower instincts. His credo was never to harm or take advantage of women, as they should be treated as goddesses from the heavens. He lived by that, as it was one of the only few things he had worth living for. After several outfit changes, and some serious price slashing due to Nami's haggling skills, the pair left the shop with several shopping bags, carried by the blonde chef. Eventually they crossed paths with Usopp, who seemed to be gathering a crowd around him, and a mysterious middle-aged man in a desperado outfit. The pair walked up to the sniper, who had fierce determination in his eyes. "What the hell are you doing, Usopp?" Nami yelled. Usopp ignored her. Instead, he focused on the challenge given to him by the famous bounty hunter in Loguetown, Daddy the Father Masterson. The challenge was to shoot a local street sign hanging from a local shop that was several kilometers away. An impossible shot for normal people, but to Usopp it was a test of his marksmanship. The challenge was set, as Usopp pulled out his slingshot, and readied a single pellet. He stretched the elastic band, and aimed carefully at his target. The wind provided even more of a challenge for him, as it blew strongly against the wooden sign, making it toss erratically, and harder to aim. Normally, a man would crack under the pressure, but Usopp kept his cool, and relied on his instincts, and his marksmanship skills to guide his aim. Time slowed down, as Usopp kept his eyes on the moving sign, anticipating the sign's swing direction. Finally, he saw an opportunity, and took the shot. Once he released the pellet, it soared in a perfectly straight line. No one heard the impact considering they were at a distance from the target. Tension filled the air for a moment before Masterson opted for his daughter to hand him the goggles. She begrudgingly accepted, and passed it on to him. The two marksmen stared each other down before the older man handed him the goggles. "You win, son of Usopp," Masterson conceded. Grabbing his rightful prize, Usopp kept his ferocity, and spoke in a strong, confident voice, similar to when he fought Kuro, but there was no anger behind it, only pride. "The name's Usopp. Remember it, because the whole world will know about a fearsome warrior who sailed the Grand Line." The spectators, i.e. a few denizens of Loguetown, gaped in awe of the teen's boast. Some thought he was crazy, most of them however thought he would actually do it. Nami was surprised by the bravado, contrary to how she met Usopp before. Apparently, after he was killed by Kuro, and miraculously came back from the dead, his attitude changed, and he had been granted the same conqueror haki as Luffy. Sanji eyed his crewmate with a curious stare before he caught sight of someone in the crowd. An old man in his 80s wearing nothing but rags, and had grey curly eyebrows in the same fashion as Sanji. His single eye widened when he immediately recognized him. The old man quickly noticed Sanji looking back at him, and quickly shuffled out of the crowd, and walked away at a fast pace. In a reflex, he dropped the bags carrying Nami's new clothes, and ran after the old man. Usopp and Nami were startled, and their attention was brought to the pirate chef, who ran off all of a sudden. "Sanji-kun, where are you going?" She called out to him, but no answer was given, as his form had already disappeared. Nami suddenly felt a tinge of worry gripping her heart at Cook's action to run off urgently, like his life depended on him. Ever since she met him, she couldn't control the thumping of her heart, and the uncontrollable heat that came with it. She knew how out of character this was for her to act like this, since she was the one who performed the charms and wiles to trick men into doing stuff for her. And now this Cook that she had just met a week ago, had already sent her spiraling into a storm of love and lust, but mostly lust. Her thoughts trailed back to when Sanji protected her treasure from Marines by beating them to a pulp with his legs, and she rewarded him with a kiss on the lips. Since then, her body grew hotter when she was close to his proximity, and it aches when she is apart from him. She nearly lost it back at the clothing store when she was so close to him, and was nearly ready to jump his bones right then and there. Their physical need got so bad that the navigator eventually took up the habit of masturbating in her room at night, thinking of how she longed to be touched by the blonde chef. Usopp's voice made her lose train of thought. "Hey Nami, I don't want to interrupt whatever it is you're dreaming about." He gestured to the crimson blush across her face, and her fidgeting legs. "But maybe we should head back to the ship." Nami was suddenly brought back to earth when she suddenly realized that a few of the spectators were staring at her flustered form. Feeling the sense of embarrassment turn into rage, she rounded on the sniper, who stepped back a bit when he saw that murderous look women give men when they think they did something wrong, but didn't know what they did wrong. "What?" Nami said nothing except shoved the bags onto Usopp, and forced him to carry all of them while she stormed ahead of him. Usopp let out an exasperated sigh. Women then followed her in step, leaving confused spectators before they went about their business. But Nami's fury vanished when she felt the familiar chill up her spine that warned her that a storm was coming, and a big one at that. Zoro regained his composure, but his pride, as a man, had been damaged significantly after that embarrassing moment when he encountered the Kuina double. "Damn it. How could I be so weak?" The swordsman berated himself for cracking under pressure, and all because he saw the face of his dead female rival on the body of a woman. Jin trailed a few steps behind, smirking amusedly at Zoro, as he had just witnessed his comrade's reputation as bad get knocked down a peg. Zoro let out a frustrated groan. "I guess it can't be helped. I mean, it's uncanny how much she looks like Kuina. And she's even a swordsman. Damn, I was weak." Jin began to laugh uproariously at his green-haired, causing the swordsman to toss some glare over his shoulder. "What?" Zoro asked, annoyed at Jin's taunting laughter. When he paused, Jin spoke up again. You face down Mehik and live to tell about it, but when it comes to women who can handle swords, you're like a deer caught in the headlights. The helmsman finished while beginning to laugh uncontrollably. Zoro's glare darkened. He turned to face the still laughing Jin, and hoisted him roughly by the scruff of his shirt. Are you just asking me to help sign your death warrant? He growled. Jin ceased his laughter, and raised a hand wordlessly telling Zoro to calm down. Before you even tried to kill me, he then gestured his right index finger in the respective direction. We're here. Zoro whipped his head in the direction Jin was referring to, and went wide-eyed when they had finally found the weapon shop. Putting aside the conversation of Zoro's pride for the moment, the two pirates entered the shop. Upon hearing the footsteps of new customers, a red-nosed, shifty-looking man with a ridiculous haircut came out from behind a curtain separating the back room from the store, with a faux smile of welcome. Ah, customers. Yes, please feel free to look around at our inventory of weaponry. Whether new or old, I'll buy and sell them for a reasonable price. Zoro was the first to speak. He pulled out a couple of bills and placed them on the counter. I have 100,000, this should be enough to buy 2 swords, right? The shopkeeper's elated grin vanished instantly and was replaced with a disappointed frown. Only 100,000 will get you a blunt sword and a rusted cleaver, he replied, dropping the nice act. Damn it, Nami. Zoro cursed the navigator for being so cheap. The shopkeeper's eyes turned to Jin, who was leaning against the wall. And what do you want? Jin placed his tonfa on the counter next. I need these repaired, with stronger material if possible. And make it quick, he said. The proprietor took the tonfa in his hands and looked at them for a moment. I can have these repaired in 30 minutes for 400,000. Jin placed several bills in front of the shopkeeper, surprising Zoro. When the hell did you get that money? He asked. Jin shrugged. I had some money saved up when I traveled with Krieg. He spoke the name of his former captain without formality or any amount of respect. The swordsman glowered. Fuck, I should have known better than to ask Nami for money. The shopkeepers started uninteresting at the two until Zoro's katana grabbed his attention. He went wide-eyed when he saw the familiar white handle and scabbard. That sword, could it be? Or could I see that katana you have, sir? He stammered, desperately trying and failing to keep calm. Zoro shrugged, handing his most treasured keepsake to the odd-looking little man. As soon as the sword was clutched in his grubby hands, he unsheathed the blade and gaped at it like a fanboy geeking out a new comic. The blade he was examining was, oh, wow. His thoughts were suddenly disturbed by a woman's gasp. Zoro was surprised to see the look-alike of his dead friend. Her again. The woman promptly snatched the sword from the store owner and stared at it in utter amazement. This is Wado Ichimonji, Straight Road of Harmony, one of the 21 leaders Wazumono, great swords. It's really rare. She commented highly on the blade. Zoro raised an eyebrow at mentioning his sword's full name. He never bothered to ask his sensei what type of sword it was, as he was only interested in the fact that it was a keepsake from his deceased friend. Now he's hearing this sword he had been given to him is one of the rarest blades in the world. The shopkeeper slammed his fist on the counter. You idiot. Would you have to tell him that? Now you've ruined a perfectly good transaction. Get out before you put me out of business. The woman snapped out of her thoughts when the owner began yelling at her. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say something wrong? She apologized. The merchant pinched the bridge of his nose, letting more blood flow into his nose, making it a deeper shade of red. Never mind. Look, you came to pick up your sword, right? Maido Shigure, Autumn Rain. Here, take it, and get out. The merchant pulled out an ornate design sheathed sword and threw it to her, which caught her slightly off guard as she fumbled her catch and tripped backwards only to crash into a few sword barrels, spilling scattered blades all over the floor. Damn it, you klutzy girl. The shopkeeper sputtered angrily, a large vein appearing on the top of his dome. Jin snickered as he watched the girl clumsily gather her bearings. Zoro merely stared uninterestedly. That's when I saw a katana that landed closest to his feet. As soon as he laid his eyes on it, he felt drawn to it for some unknown reason. He knelt down to pick it up and firmly grasped the hilt. Once he did, the blood in his arm went cold, but paid it no mind. The shopkeeper's beady little eyes darted back to the green-haired swordsman, only to whiten to the size of dinner plates, his jaw dropping halfway to the floor, and beads of sweat trickled down in every direction of his head. The sword fanatic noticed the sword as well, and gasped in shock. That sword. She paused for a moment to pull out a small book from her pants pocket. She flipped through the pages before landing on a specific page matching the appearance of the sword Zoro was holding. That's Sandai Katetsu 3, one of the 50 Wazumono, great swords. Jin shrugged. So? He contested aloofly. The woman then rounded on the helmsman, disbelief written across her face. So? This is a fine great sword that is practically worth $1 million easy. So what is it doing in a barrel full of regular used swords? Jin turned his grim gaze to the shopkeeper who was now sweating bullets. Or, didn't you say that swords in this barrel are worth only 50,000 each? The sword proprietor shook under Jin's intimidating glare before responding. Yeah. He quietly muttered. Then purchasing it won't be a problem, right? The shopkeeper suddenly lost his cool. No. Not that one. I can't sell that one. And why is that? Jin persisted. Because Zoro finished his sentence. It's a cursed blade, isn't it? He said. The shopkeeper blinked. Have you heard of it? No? I can just tell. He replied, not taking his eyes off the sword. It was truly a beautiful blade with a bluish flame that gave the impression of being forged by a demon blacksmith. The shopkeeper gritted his teeth anxiously. Well, you're right. The Kotetsu swords are all well-made sharp swords, but they're all cursed. Zoro, Jin, and the woman said nothing before the man continued. Do you think you're the only one to hold that sword? Countless famous swordsmen have died in the most horrific way possible, all because they wielded the Kotetsu swords. These days, no swordsman worth his pride would use those cursed swords. Of course, even if he did, he wouldn't stay in this world for very long. I'd get rid of the sword myself, but every time I get near it, I feel an eerie chill in my bones, and back away from it. The blue-haired sword fanatic bowed, and apologized. Gomen, I didn't realize it was such a dangerous sword on its own. Now do you get how dangerous it is? I can't sell it, and I can't get rid of the damn thing. Hell, I'm already cursed just having it in my shop. Before that, I used to have hundreds of customers lining up to get swords, so they could sail the Grand Line. But then, once I got my hands on this hellish blade, my luck changed. Customers stopped coming in because those damned Marines came in and started ruining my business. The woman frowned. Marines protect people from bad guys, she argued. The shopkeeper sneered. Yeah, well, I like bad guys. They kept this business running. Now I'm barely getting by. Pretty soon I'll have to shut down. He was about to say more when Zoro grinned devilishly and raised Kotetsu high in the right light. I like this sword. I'll take it. The woman looked at him like he was insane. Jin smirked, and the merchant gaped like a fish out of water. Didn't you hear what I just said, you damned fool? If you wield that sword, you'll die. His burly wife came up from behind, and without warning smacked him upside the head. You're the fool. Just sell the damn thing, and be rid of it. The shopkeeper whimpered from his wife's love tap. Beat but honey. Zoro interrupted them again. Tell you what, how about my luck versus the sword's curse? We'll see which one is stronger. The shopkeeper and his wife blinked confusedly at the swordsman's statement until he threw the sword up into the air and extended his bandana-covered arm out. All the color drained from the merchant and his wife, as well as the pupils from their eyes. They started wondering about whether this man had balls of brass or was he just plainly insane. The blue-haired woman gasped as she made an attempt to stop him when a firm grip clasped on her shoulder held her in place. She abruptly turned her head to see it was Jin. What are you doing? Stop him from doing this. Aren't you his friend? She yelled at the helmsman only to be silenced by his fearsome glare. It's exactly why he's my comrade that he needs to do this. He spoke with his usual gravely tone. This isn't a matter of boasting or showing off. He's literally placing his ambition as a swordsman on the line. If it was a choice to do things by life's expectancies or death, he'd pick death any day of the week. He finished explaining to her. Jin recalled the days Zoro fight Mihawk. He knew he would be no match for the master swordsman, but he still fought with everything he had, and, as a result, he managed to leave a cut on Mihawk. That's when he learned what the crew was about, putting their own lives on the line for their dreams. Now the question for him was, what was his dream? The sound of the blade clang rang through the shop. All eyes were on the swordsman who appeared to have his arms still attached, and the sword sunk to the ground all the way up to the hilt. Zoro grinned as he pulled out the blade. This time he could feel the sword had a different feel to it, similar to how he held Wado in his hands when he first held it. Kotetsu's curse had been broken, and Zoro won, meaning the sword had chosen him as its master. The shopkeeper could only stare gobsmacked at the man in front of him, who recklessly cast aside his own mortality to prove his worth as a swordsman. Never had he seen such ambition in one man before. Like I said, I'll take it, said Zoro. Loguetown Part 2. Sailing towards our dreams. Luffy stood at the center of town square, amazement evident on his face. He had been glued there for at least a good 10 minutes, but to him it felt timeless. His eyes were fixed onto a view of what he considered to be a historical landmark. The gallows in town square where the legendary pirate, Gol D. Roger, the very first pirate king, took life by its haunches, and let his infamy spread across the world like wildfire. It was here that he made his declaration, and challenged the next generation by announcing that he had buried treasure hidden in that supposed place. Of course, those who personally knew the pirate king automatically knew what location he was speaking of. As for the rest of the populace, they merely spread rumors that the location of the treasure was in Raftel, which was also said to be the last stop in the Grand Line. Now Luffy didn't care if there was any treasure or not, although he knew that a certain navigator and his crew would probably contemplate castrating him otherwise, if there happened to be an empty treasure chest with a note saying, "The greatest treasure of all is freedom." Then probably barge into whatever afterlife Roger was in, and throttle the Pirate King for all eternity. He laughed to himself before continuing his thoughts. He didn't care about finding treasure, conquering the world or making a name for himself. The last part was actually a half-lie. He really wanted to. He simply believed that the person with the most freedom in this world should deserve the title of Pirate King. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head. I wonder if the view up top is just as cool. He thought to himself. Naturally, Luffy, being a young man whose natural curiosity went hand in hand with his mischievous nature, did what came naturally, and climbed up to railings of the scaffolding. Back on the Going Merry, Hawkins' eyes were closed, as he meditated on deck with several tarot cards spread out before him in a neat circle. His hand raised over them, Hawkins allowed the hand of fate to show him the next step in his journey. He felt his hand grasp one of the cards, and opened his eyes to see what fate had in store for him. The Wheel of Fortune. This card entailed luck and change. It symbolizes a change that just happens, and with it brings great joy. All his young life spent as an acolyte, the mystic had not been one to defy or deny his fate created by a higher existence, as that superpower always kept the universe running, thus satisfied with that answer. But when Hawkins had met Luffy, he honestly had no idea that he would be lumped in with a captain whose survivability would not reach zero, and a crew that manifested their own destiny. As such, he began to question his place here with his, as he felt like the black sheep of the bunch. Hawkins remembered how the hand of fate had deterred the shadow of death from claiming Usopp when he was run through by Kuro's blades, and came back reborn anew. He also recalled the duel between Zoro and Mihawk, surprised that the shadow of death had not claimed him either. Hawkins continued to hold his endless stare on the card. He could not help wondering, what sort of impact will this crew have on the world? Afterwards, he organized his cards, and put them away in his coat pocket. No sooner than that, a strong gust of wind enveloped the ship, and the waves began to crash heavily against it. Hawkins suddenly felt a dangerous presence approach the island. Ryoka raised him slightly above the water so as to not freak the locals, and began to whine and whimper when he sensed a huge storm was coming. Hawkins noticed the Sea King's strange behavior. He saw trepidation and fear in those red eyes unlike any other animal when they sensed a storm, as if it knew what lied in that storm. Checking the cards for the fate of the crew's outcome, the survivability still did not reach zero. Interesting, the raggedy old man hobbled as fast as he could to get away from the blonde-haired young man who spotted him. He passed through crowd after crowd for a few minutes, until he cut around a corner to a back alley he recognized. Yes, soon he would be in his house, and get some much-needed rest for his aching body. Eventually he reached his residence, which was a small shanty. He shakily reached for the handle, then suddenly paused. The old man turned halfway around to see Sanji leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and holding a piercing gaze to the old man. The two shared moments of silence until the old man spoke up again. "Would you like to come in?" Sanji nodded, and stepped inside the rundown abode. The pirate chef took a minute to analyze the interior. No windows, a leaky roof with a few crevices, the only bed available was a dirty mattress on the floor, and lastly, the only pieces of furniture was a wooden table with 2 chairs, and an old rusty stove with an equally rusty kettle on top brewing tea. "I've prepared some tea if you're interested." The blonde chef accepted his offer, and put out his cigarette in the ashtray on his right-hand side. He sat in one of the chairs while waiting for the tea. After a few minutes, the tea kettle whistled loudly, signifying that the tea was ready. The old man handed him his cup, and sat opposite from his guest, as they both drank their tea silently. When they finished, the old man cleared off the table, and sat back down, looking Sanji square in the eye, no pun intended. "It's been too long," Sanji said to the old man. It was then Sanji guarded a haunted look on his face, and replied back, "Yes, it has, grandfather." The tension in the room rose for a few moments before the blonde spoke again. "Why did you run?" Sanji asked. The old man released a weary sigh he didn't know how long he held, as his weary eyes became interested in the ground, his hands clutching his knees despite the arthritic pains he was feeling in both areas. He tilted his head up slowly to face his one and only heir, and spoke in a slightly raspy voice. "I couldn't bear to face you, not after everything that's happened." Tears slid down his wrinkled cheeks, his eyes showed nothing but pain and loss, as he continued. "My poor old heart can't bear to withstand any more torment. You know nothing of the torment I went through." Sanji replied with no emotion. The elderly man let out a somnolent laugh, wiping away his tears. "Probably not," he said. "So why don't you tell me your story, and I'll tell you mine." He paused. Suddenly his demeanor changed to a more serious attitude. "And then I'll reveal the truth to you, Suche." Luffy yelled his excitement aloud, taking in the wonderful view from atop the gallows. The town was huge, as he could see rows of buildings, as far as the eye could see. But while the view itself was impressive, it wasn't what Luffy was interested in. He reveled in the fact that he was the first person in recorded history to stand in the same spot the Pirate King left this world with parting words to instill the golden age of piracy. So this is what Gold Roger saw just before he died. His moment of happiness was cut short when the voice of the police chief blared over the megaphone. "Hey, you. Get down from there immediately." The scarred teen snapped out of his thoughts, and looked down to see a group of policemen surrounding the scaffold. Luffy pointed to himself to see if they were acknowledging him. "You, me?" he asked innocently. "Yes, you. Get down from there now." The police chief replied. "Why? That is a special execution platform under the control of the world government. Trespassing on it is illegal, so get down to." The officer was cut off by a large spiked club smashing the side of his head, sending him flying back into the crowd. "Ara, don't be so mean, Mr. Policema." The hooded assailant spoke with a sultry voice. Luffy turned his curious gaze to the crowd when he spotted the attacker with the female voice wearing a cowboy hat with a large red plume. Throwing her cloak off, all of the townspeople present suddenly had hearts in their eyes, as they were in the presence of possibly a new candidate for the most beautiful woman in the world title. They took in her full heartless figure that most women would kill for, and men would fall for, starting from her long, slender legs covered in her tight red-white striped capri pants to her slim toned waist, and finally to her open button-up purple coat, revealing what most men were focusing on, her buxom E-cup breasts barely supported by her white spaghetti-strap bikini top. Her face was perfectly sculpted, with her luscious ruby-red lips, her enchanting forest green eyes, and her long, wavy, ebony-colored hair that reached just past her shoulders. But the most noticeably and highly attractive trait that everyone had their eyes on was her smooth, shiny porcelain skin that reflected the perfect amount of light from the sun, a true vision of beauty indeed. The policemen weren't even paying attention to their unconscious leader, who was bleeding profusely from his facial wounds. She peered up and saw Luffy, making her smile, revealing her beautiful pearly whites. "Hello FFY, it's been a while. How have you been? I heard you've made quite a name for yourself." She spoke with lust and admiration in her eyes. Naturally, in his oblivious and confused state of mind, Luffy asked, "Who are you?" The woman smiled seductively, making a handful of men approximately close to where she was standing suffer simultaneous nosebleeds burst, making them fall back onto the ground, their heart-shaped eyes still throbbing. Not noticing them, the woman spoke again. "Now don't tell me you don't remember this face." Luffy scrunched his face in concentration, as he racked his brain trying to remember if he had met a supermodel on his journey. The mystery woman giggled amusedly when she saw his expression until he gave her a blank stare with half-lidded eyes. The gears in Luffy's head turned and turned, but, "Yeah, I got nothing," he said. The woman smirked to herself before replying, "Well, I never forgot about you." She raised her hand over her toned stomach and rubbed it lightly. "You were the first person to ever strike me, Luffy." "Huh? I hit you, lady," he responded, still confused at the whole situation, not even caring that the vengeful glares of the townspeople in the square were directed at him when they heard that he struck this beautiful woman. "Yes. And your powerful fists," she spoke in a sensual voice. "So hard." The last part of her sentence had a sexual overtone to it, as the crowd gasped and backed up slightly, their enamored states returning full force. Luffy just scratched the back of his head in awkward silence, thinking of a way to get out of his situation and back to the ship, since he saw what he came to see. Then the ravishing beauty spoke up again. This time her attention was to the crowd of people surrounding her. "Now tell me, who is the most beautiful woman in the world?" All the townspeople got on one knee and gestured to her. "You are." She giggled once more. "That's right, I am. There isn't a man in the world that won't grovel at my feet. But I'm not interested in small fries." She lifted a finger and pointed to Luffy, the lust in her eyes ever present. "I adore strong men, and you are in my sights, Monkey D. Luffy. Thanks for watching my video. See you next time. Till then, sayonara."